You're watching Devil's Advocates on the YouTube.com.
So, what do we go see tonight, John?
8th Grade.
That's right, and who was 8th Grade directed by?
Bo Burnham.
That's right, YouTube sensation Bo Burnham went out, made a film, got rave reviews, Sundance, South by, and now it's finally hitting, what?
Angelica Film Center.
Yeah.
Yes, we disagree with Rotten Tomatoes on this channel, but no, we don't particularly like to do it with smaller movies because that kind of feels weird to like punch down, so to speak. And movies that don't necessarily deserve to be scrutinized with like nitpickiness, unless that's how we actually feel. But with a movie like 8th Grade, what we like to do is just have a little bit of a discussion. We'll review the movie, tell you our opinion and thoughts on it, and then probably towards like the middle of the video, we'll get into spoilers and we'll warn you before then. So if you haven't seen 8th Grade yet, you can jump out. But if you have seen 8th Grade, then you can check it out. And if you haven't seen 8th Grade yet, you can watch the first half of the video and we'll tell you if you should see it or not.
And if you haven't seen 8th Grade, you can watch the trailer.
Do it.
We might do some trickery to not get flagged. Trickery.
So, 8th Grade, a comedy that's real. Authentic. Did you like it, Evan?
I did.
Did you love it, Evan?
No.
Yeah, me neither.
But I definitely liked a lot of it. And I think that one thing that I realized while watching is, to some extent, you sort of have to realize what the movie is selling you, and then you can settle in and enjoy it more. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's selling you like supreme authenticity. It's kind of like a boxed-in timeline movie. It starts with the beginning of the last week of 8th grade and it ends with the end of the last week of 8th grade. So it all takes place over the course of 1 week, and this week is supposed to encapsulate basically the entire life and existence and character of this girl who's an 8th grader, Kayla, and we're supposed to sort of like learn about what she is and what she does and her thoughts and feelings, and some major turning point things happen. It's one of those classic coming of age things, kind of in the vein of Linklater, where they take what is supposed to be like essentially the high school experience, the middle school experience in this point, and they sort of compress it into one timeline and say, okay, a lot of big things happen to you over these years of your life, but we're going to make a movie that's only a couple days and like probably one or two more big things than what would really realistically happen in said week happen to this girl all in 1 week. But that's kind of the value of it, is that it's like the fun of seeing all that shit at once.
And usually what makes movies like Linklater movies and this movie work is A, the fun variety that we get with those many things shoved into one movie, and then B, the performances, all the different characters that bring it to life. I can certainly say that I thought that the performances were across the board fantastic. And that's, when I say across the board, I mean it, because there's so many extras where we'd be like, that kid doesn't have a line. You just see them, but like, it just feels real. Somehow Bo Burnham was able to get kids to just be themselves and then film it almost documentary style, but then insert it into the fiction and it still feel natural.
Yeah, like I said earlier, this like supreme authenticity of the movie is one of its strengths, and in some ways some of its weaknesses. I found myself like at worst in this movie when I wasn't 1,000% engaged, thinking like, okay, that's your trick. Like your trick is that she really sounds like a real kid. She says like a lot and she stutters a lot, and you know, the kids all really look and seem and act like absolutely real. It's not Hollywood at all. They're all clearly their age. So, and then at best, I'm like, wow, this is tremendous how authentic he's able to get this. Like, this is true craftsmanship. We've all grown up, and it's tremendous that he's able to find a way to make it so relatively real feeling. So to me, it's sort of like the duality of those two things. Like, it sort of lives and dies by what it is, and what it is to me is like a really real feeling movie. And I will say that in keeping with all of that, I need to give it more credit than I maybe did when I was actually watching it, simply because if I hadn't seen the trailer, I think I would have like really been blown away by this movie, because a lot of the best elements, including the like weird, gross authenticity of like seeing middle school and all its warts and all, like I said, and some of the strong directing choices too of like camera work and whatnot, are all things that are showcased really well in the trailer. And we've been seeing this trailer for months, and like just like even like some of the best jokes in this movie and visual gags and stuff are all in the trailer. And it's all stuff that is there in the movie. I just don't react to it as strongly when I do see the movie because I've seen it a million times. And I just feel like if I had walked into this movie at, let's say, Sundance, and I had no idea what was going on with it, I may have actually been like truly blown away. But as it stands now, I think one of my issues with the movie is that it got a little repetitive at times with its directorial style.
No, I want to reiterate that fact that the trailer has an interesting relationship to the movie, because there's a lot of great jokes in the trailer and somehow they don't hit the same way in the movie. But one thing that is nice is there is still a lot of the movie that's not shown in the trailer. Like if you sit down and you watch the movie and it almost feels like I'm just getting all the trailer hits, like then the rest of the movie happens and it gives you a chance to sort of recalibrate a little bit.
But yeah, as far as like me feeling the directing was repetitive, there was this voyeuristic sort of, well, voyeuristic and subjective camera work, especially in the first half of this movie. There's so much subjectivity of like the girl Kayla's in class and she's in an auditorium and she's in wherever, and you see like the backs of people's heads in frame, and then like whoever's talking, like whether it be the teacher or the principal or whatever, they are like kind of far away from frame, and you hear them talking while you see backs of heads. And that is both weirdly like voyeuristic and subjective, because like she's voyeuring whatever the scene's subject is, but she's always the subject, this girl Kayla, so you're always seeing her point of view, and oftentimes she's not the center of attention. And that's sort of a really intentional choice Bo Burnham makes, which I found to be really interesting, that it's like you're following this girl Kayla, but she never really is or feels like the most important person in the room, but yet she's still the most important person of the movie. So you're with her, and if being with her means being like kind of weirdly far away and obscured from like what the meat of the scene is, whether it's, you know, a drill or a presentation or whatever, then that's cool that you're with that. And then there are other times in the movie where it's like voyeuristic to her, like we're voyeuring her. They do this like tracking shot that's like a consistent motif where she'll like walk with her backpack or whatever, and they do it a ton of times where the camera is following her and it's like we're watching her. And I just thought that stuff was interesting, and it's really strong choices, and that's always great for like a first-time director to make really strong, bold choices. But at the same time, as the movie started to like sort of get into its second act, there were a couple moments where I was like, oh, what else you got? You know what I mean? Because it was like you do those shots, you do those ideas, and you have a scene where it's like those types of ideas conveyed in either comedic or dramatic way. And then they just kind of happen again and again and again. And until the movie sort of has like a bit of a turning point in the midpoint, that stuff was starting to get a little bit thin to me, because I was impressed by it before, but it's the exact type of strong movement that makes you start to see through it when it doesn't. Not see through it, but like it's those strong choices that are exactly the type of thing that you do start to like, because they're so bold, you notice them in a positive way. And when you notice anything in a movie, like you're actively thinking about it, if you do that for too long, then it will just actually take you out of the film, because you're like, okay, I'm noticing the shot. That's bad. Like, you shouldn't actually actively notice something's happening.
Yeah, that does remind me of another element of the movie that comes on very bold, and then actually for me, I felt resolved in a way that I was very appreciative of. At the start of the movie and throughout, there's a lot of like just use of technology and modern applications in the way that they've clearly affected, you know, middle school life. You know, I'm talking cell phone, Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, all the stuff you'd think of. And I did actually sort of appreciate that, despite the fact it's ubiquitous in the narrative. As far as like thematically, what the movie's point I feel like it was making, it didn't end up going for like a very didactic, like kids are so much more miserable now because these things exist, and they just facilitate, you know, like 10 times worse depression and self-absorption and all this stuff. It's just like middle school sucks, because the movie's so empathetic. It has to include that and like detail those things, but like it was surprisingly non-judgmental on that, which I think will make it more relatable to kids. Like, look, you might need to recognize the way that these things affect your life, sometimes negatively, but that's not like the point of the movie. It's not like it ever like became like an anti-cell phone movie in a way that like it almost threatened to at times.
Yeah, I also think that might be part of Bo Burnham's just general approach to the empathy of this movie and the emotion of it, which is to say that he clearly stuffs it with the authenticity of his youth and stuff that he recalls from middle school, and he has a sort of hands-off approach in some of the things that he doesn't purport to know. He is not a female, like he was never an 8th grade girl, and he didn't go through middle school with cell phones, right? Like he went through middle school 15 years ago or whatever. And so with stuff like that, like you said, where he presents it because he knows it's valid and it's truthful, I think that there's something a little bit different about the way he presents it from a hands-off perspective, partially because he knows it's not his place to make judgment or assessment of, because it's not actually true to his experience. Like, it's kind of interesting to me some points during this movie that I was like, I wonder why he wanted to make a 2018 movie about an 8th grader instead of just like, because he would easily made a period piece about an 8th grader in 2001 or whenever he went through 8th grade. Like, you could have, like Lady Bird. Like Lady Bird, this movie reminded me a lot of Lady Bird in some scenes, and I was like, Lady Bird is Greta Gerwig just doing her high school experience. She's like, I went to high school in 2001. Bush was a big thing. You know, 9/11 had just happened. The housing market was crashing, and so I wanted to make a movie about me in high school in the 2000s. I guess not 2001. It's 2003 or 4, but still. So Bo Burnham making it 2018 and presenting all of those like very uniquely 2018 things, like being addicted to your cell phone and whatnot, and how that changes your relationship with your parents and whatnot, and how it's just a kind of manifestation of what's just universally there about being this age of like, you're always going to be like shitty to your dad when you're that age, regardless of cell phones. I found that interesting to be like, that was sort of his point, was like, I'm going to show you truthfully what 2018 is, but not necessarily make that many statements on it, because the point of this is like, if you're sitting in the audience, because it's rated R, by the way, there's a really good chance you haven't been in middle school in years. And if so, you'll still connect to this. And I thought that was like partially kind of the point.
Yeah.
Although I would be interested to see what like an actual 14-year-old thought of this movie.
For sure, because it's been discussed that this movie was made and should be seen, like, was made about 8th graders and should be seen by 8th graders, despite the fact that it is, you know, explicit in ways that movies for 8th graders usually are not.
But yeah, with all that being said, I feel like we kind of have to jump into spoilers now, because some stuff does drastically change in the second half of this movie that makes it a little bit different than all the stuff we were describing earlier. And without spoiling that stuff, we'll just say that, like, if you're interested in seeing this movie, if the trailer piqued your interest, if you're a Bo Burnham fan, you should absolutely see it out of curiosity. It's pretty much what the trailer told you it was going to be, for better or for worse, which is to say, I don't think you'll be surprised that it's, like, offering so much more than what you glimpsed into at the trailer. It's more just like an expansion of what you saw in the trailer.
Longer. But
certainly not worse, and definitely worth your time as far as, like, just seeing that girl's performance. She's really, really good.
Now, spoilers.
So, Bo Burnham makes a pretty strong choice to say this is a movie that is supremely authentic. We're going full reality. It's almost like, avant-garde to a certain point. And then we're going to have something very dramatic in having a situation that's depicted, like, in a pretty harrowing way, of our protagonist Kayla now being caught into a, like, situation where she might be taken advantage of sexually by an older person. Not like a tremendously older person, like a high schooler, not like a 40-year-old man, but still, nonetheless, a very dramatic thing. And I think it's important that, like, Bo Burnham presents it still in, like, a way that it often probably does happen in real life, and can be really scary for people. And it's not actually like a super over-the-top, really, like, sort of traumatic melodrama thing. The movie doesn't totally throw away being super slice of life and real, but at the same time, it must be acknowledged that compared to everything else that we have seen so far in that movie, it's way more dramatic. It's a huge twist towards movie, like drama. So does that work for you?
So here's the thing, because the depiction of it, like, I think that's exactly how a lot of those situations go down. That's the rhetoric that's used by older men trying to take advantage of younger women. The fact that it happens there, I think, was a symptom of it being a movie that all has to take place in a week and is crammed in there. I think that Bo Burnham did his research. I think he talked to women. He knows that's a common experience. He knows that it's something that could like percentage-wise, it's just super likely.
Yes, it's not like weird that we're seeing this normal girl have it happen to her. Like, when I say it's dramatic, that's what I was saying. It's interesting because, like, it's dramatic, but it's still authentic, and it doesn't feel like suddenly we're watching a victim as opposed to the average 8th grade girl. Like,
so I'll say this: if the movie had chosen to use its, like, really serious, like, cachet, like, spending of screen time on something different, like an eating disorder, something else that we also know affects a huge percentage of Americans, it's very potent, very real, not necessarily depicted realistically in this way. I just feel like he felt like he had to include something like that in the film, and that's, like, was more preoccupied in our time, so that's why it was there.
What's important about that situation is her quitting her YouTube channel, and then the way her father reacts to the situation, and then we get, like, what is essentially the emotional climax of the movie, which is this big conversation she has with her father, and just her, like, ultimate spiral down into melancholic depression at the end of her 8th grade week of all these things have been going wrong for her, and she's feeling really low. This is the ultimate, like, kick that really seals the grave of, like, I'm just sad, and it's now a movie about, like, it's kind of a movie about teenage depression, and then the ending sort of serves that of how can we get back from there. So, like you said, he inserts this scene, and it's really, really effective in the moment, but it is sort of a weird, like, super shot of, like, plotting to move the film forward into being, like, hey, this is a malaise of, like, real slice of life stuff, and so if I put this thing in here now, then at least I can carry you to the end of the movie because you'll buy that emotions have gotten this high, as opposed to, like, another thing leads to another thing leads to another thing, and eventually she's just actually sad. No, this is a big thing that's like, yo, something happens big. And, like, again, the movie would probably be pretty lame if it didn't have something like that. If it really did just continue what it was doing in the first 2 acts of being like, look how real this is, she's so awkward, and then it eventually just ended, I don't think it would have been as effective enough. And if it did try to still end with a big speech from the dad about her self-esteem and whatnot, I also think it might not be as effective, because it'd be like, okay, Bo Burnham just, decided to end the movie now, and check my watch. I guess we're getting close to the end. And at least with this, it's still a symptom of like all of her actions earlier of trying to connect with people, and it really works.
I think what came to mind for me actually was Boyhood, which has like one relatively dramatic sequence within a larger movie that is like 3 hours of slice of life, and there's lots of different ways to read into that within the context of that movie, just about how like usually life is this, and sometimes it serves you this plate of shit, and like how we change from it, because some of the most fascinating things about the movie is just like seeing how the characters are later, like holy crap, we can see how they've changed because of it. And this just like you said, needing that jolt to like make it a little bit more of a movie than just a thing. So he gave us that one, and it was very effective. Even once again, the insertion of a little awkward, but I'm not saying I feel weird criticizing it, because I think it was done well, and it was done like sensitively and in a way that I think a lot of people connect to.
And I think we have this weird thing with us making YouTube videos right now. Like, it's funny that the movie's about YouTube, but we do these discussion videos, and we see these movies like Sorry to Bother You or 8th Grade, where we feel like we need to have a discussion. Like, we make this video, it's like we need to justify us making this video, so we have this weird sort of back and forth where we play devil's advocate a little bit, and we talk about the things that bothered us about the film and the things that we liked about the film. But truth be told, like, when it all comes down to the end of the day, like, if you had just had to present this as like, what is it compared to every other film in the world, as opposed to like you had to say your reservations about the movie, I would have to admit that there's so much stuff in this that are better than most movies you see. Like, this still is better than 99% of movies that come out ever, and maybe that should just be like the narrative that we like. But I mean, it's interesting to have discussions, but I don't know. Movies like this make me think about the fact that it's like, why do we make videos like this where we say issues we have with the movie? Because we do genuinely feel that way when we watch the film. We feel like we have those issues. But then there's stuff like her relationship with her father, which I found to be like tremendously authentic. And it's almost like I don't even feel like having to talk about this on this YouTube video, because it's like everyone's saying that. It has a 98% Rotten Tomatoes. So it's like, sort of what's the point? But I feel like I have to say that and make that clear, that it's like, and you're wondering what our actual thoughts of the movie are, for it seems like we don't like it. It's just interesting that it's like, it's not maybe personally my favorite movie I saw this so far this year, but like I just do have to acknowledge the fact that the thing that is maybe unspoken in my head, because it has a 98% on Rotten Tomatoes, is that this movie is really, really good and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, we're talking through it, and sometimes that involves talking about things you don't like, just to prove that all the things you do like were sort of unassailable in the first place. 8th Grade is a really great movie. We hope that you guys go see it, and when you go see it, you can sound off in the comments below, join us in the discussion, tell us what you guys liked about the movie, any thoughts you have, its relationship to 8th grade, to your 8th grade technology, all the good stuff.
Oh yeah, I did want to talk about this one other thing that bothered me about the movie, though. Because I think I'm allowed to, because everyone loved it, and I think it's pretty damn good, so like I can say bad stuff, right? That's how it works. I will say that there's this kid that looks like Evan, like truly it looks like 8th grade Evan, and he has like a snorkel, and he's supposed to be kooky and wacky, and it's like, haha, what a doofus this kid is, and we make jokes about him, and he's one of the many forms of comedic relief in this film. And he's funny when you first see him on screen, and when I did see him on screen, I was like, okay, that's funny. He's the one kid that's talking to her at the pool party, and he's a wacky sort of like nerd kid. Please, Bo Burnham, I know how self-aware you are. You seem to be like a truly socially conscious and very self-aware person about like what it is to be a skinny white kid and a nerd and whatever. Don't make the point of this movie that at the end she shouldn't be having a crush on the popular guy she has a crush on. She should actually like the lovable loser, the nerd, because everyone knows the nice guys are the ones that should get the girl. And unfortunately, while of course that's not like literally the point of this movie, and the movie does go in directions that are way smarter than just actually summing up her relationship with like boys and the potential for the future as just like she gets with the nerd, he does come back around to being like, maybe she should have been hanging out with someone nice and nerdy like her all along. And I was a little disappointed by that. I don't think it's like downright offensive or anything like that, but I'll say that for a movie that like again has some stuff I really dig in it, it was a little disappointing for me to see that like that's really what that character wound up being, that we were going to just circle it back around and be like, she actually is going to want to hang out and have like a semi-date and be happy with, for once, you know, this weirdo guy, because he's a nerd and he also is, you know, more similar to her because popular people are bad. And it's like, I don't know, that just felt a little bit too cliche for me for a movie that was so real. It's like you could have sidestepped, you had the opportunity to really sidestep some of these broader cliche storytelling tropes about like outsiders in middle school and high school and like things that are always in coming of age movies that get pretty tired. And that was one of them that I didn't think that it particularly sidestepped. It was a little disappointing to me. Do you agree?
Now this feels like a longer discussion about like.
But it's true. I think that's important. If we are going to discuss it, that's something that I felt about. Otherwise, what else do we have to offer as far as video?
But I think that like that's part of the movie's ultimate message, though. Like you said, it's a cliche thing, but like part of the comfort of the movie is that like you'll find your people, and that like she shouldn't have been trying to be someone that she wasn't. Which like, it's not. It does like yes, she tells off the popular kids or whatever, and like that is potentially more cliche. Like not necessarily allowing those people to have like more rich inner lives and stuff like that. And
when it's all said and done, this movie is just kind of cliche. It's just that literally each cliche beat it goes through, just like the dialogue and the performance is like weirdly so much more real than you usually get in a movie that does these cliches coming of age story beats.
But like, isn't that part of like what making the uplifting movie is? That you have to like promise people that like there is an end, that like there is like sense to the madness of the universe. So you'll go through 8th grade, we'll see in all its badness, but like we'll give you, and like maybe you just want a hint and it gives you more than a hint, but like it does give some closure and stuff, and once again gives like time honored advice or whatever about like why you will survive 8th grade and stuff. Is that like because when you become slightly more self-assured and stuff, you can be okay being with people that you actually belong with.
Yeah, I guess maybe this is my personal baggage, but just like to me, I'm still always just rooting for like a movie to truly subvert it, where it's like maybe the popular guy isn't an asshole. You know, maybe she does actually, either she does or doesn't get with him, but it's like we don't vilify like straightforward like popular people or whatnot, or like the girl that was mean to her. Maybe that girl actually finds common ground with her, but instead it's just like, nope, we stand up to the bullies and like it is what it is. Like that whole revenge of the nerd shit, I'm just like kind of getting a little bit tired of. And I guess to your point of like, but that's the authenticity. Like if we like a movie like this shouldn't be subversive in an unrealistic way at all, right? It shouldn't be like she actually does get with the popular guy, because that wouldn't happen in real life, truth be told. However, in real life she wouldn't tell off the popular girl either, because that doesn't happen in real life. You know, just because this movie shows her doing it messy doesn't make it any more realistic. It's still really unrealistic that she would actually have a big speech where she tells off the popular girl. And
I'm not saying the movie's perfect. I'm just saying.
I'm just saying like there's a tension to me between those two things. Then of like we can argue like, okay, realistically she would wind up hanging out with that goober kid because that's how what would happen in real life. You know, he doesn't want to subvert that, so he does play into what becomes a cliche, and that's fine. But then he does other shit that wouldn't happen in real life, which continues to play into a cliche, but doesn't make the movie more authentic. It makes it less authentic, and that kind of frustrates me.
That's why it's a 98%.
Yeah, I'm that 2%.